Discover Help presents Stress-Free Living with Ray Samich and Mr. Stress-Free Ratanjit S. Sandhi. This audio program is an unscripted and unrehearsed conversation between Ray and Ratanjit. It is shared with you in hope of adding value to your life. We encourage you to listen to this program in its entirety to receive the full impact of its message. Sit back, relax, open your heart, mind, and soul to this edition of Stress-Free Living.
We'd like to welcome you to Stress-Free Living. I'm Ray Samich. Thanks so much for joining us here today. And I'd like to introduce all of you once again to my dear friend and colleague and longtime co-host for this show, Ratanjit Sandhi. Ratanjit, how are you this fine day?
Wonderful, Ray. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you. Always better when I spend time with you, with our Zoom guests that we have with us here again today, that we are always so pleased to have joining us on the show. And while we're mentioning them, if you would like to become a member of our Zoom club, we got to come up with an official fancy name for this, Ratanjit. All of our special guests that join us live on our show every week, please contact us. You can do it by way of email, Facebook, send us a note anyway through our websites and let us know, and we will invite you to all of our events with a special Zoom link so you can actually be part of our conversation. If not, if you're just listening to our show, we welcome you that way too, on radio, internet, or on our YouTube video replays at Stress Free Living Radio. And that's the name that you would Google search there once you get into YouTube and find a whole series of our past programs. Ratanjit, let's talk today about mediocrity, because I think there's, like, you are always so good at finding two sides to every story, sometimes maybe three or four sides to every story. I think there's a couple of different sides to mediocrity. It isn't just what it seems, I think, on the surface. Yes, I think the world is settling for mediocrity, maybe less, but part of me says maybe that's not the worst thing. Maybe there's some value in not being stressed about always having to be best, about always have to be number one. But certainly we have to try hard and give a good effort to everything. So where is that balance? Where does mediocrity cross over the line of being acceptable and smart versus settling and not smart?
You see, fulfillment in life is basically what we are looking for. We are always looking for happiness. Now, ultimately, happiness can be divided into two columns: happiness, which is coming from material things felt by our five senses, and happiness felt by our inner self. So, mediocrity basically satisfies our outer needs or five senses, and our inner happiness always is part in challenging ourselves to excel, to make our best better. Although it is painful, your mind is going to say, no, nobody has done this, you cannot do it. And all these hurdles, life will present hurdles. But anybody who has excelled and come out of mediocrity ends up becoming self-satisfied. Your inner being becomes much more happier. So we don't do that for the world. We do that for our own inner happiness, the final contentment. Does it make any sense?
Makes sense, except we talk so much on the show about ego. And the people that excel the most, the people that are not satisfied with mediocrity, that want to be the best, they want to win the award, the trophy, so often that's driven by ego. And so, and even if it isn't driven by ego, once they accomplish that, once they get that first place trophy, ego is usually very much a part of that. So in a way, that seems to violate what you just said, because, are they driven past mediocrity because they want to feel good about themselves and do it for themselves and not for the world? If that's the case, then isn't that ego? If they're doing it for themselves, then isn't that because they have to have the feeling that they are the best?
Your ego is always there to take claims. Ego is never there to excel you. Look at the best player. Let's take an example of basketball best player, LeBron James. So when LeBron is playing the game, he's taking the shot, ego is further from him. Once the shot goes in and he beats his chest, that is ego. So ego is always there after the fact. Oh, I've done this. But when you are in the process of doing, if ego is present, you will never be able to do it. Ego is you get integrated into your creativity so much at the time of doing. Ego is only after effect. So it is the same thing with the old example is once you are playing it in the Carnegie Hall, you are the best violin player in the world. So they clap you, so you bow to them. And until your stomach has doubts, you will never be able to perform at your best. So once you have performed at your best, you become music. You don't become ego. It is only after the fact when you are done, everybody clapping you, you have ego. Ego is always there to take a ownership of what you have done. Ego is not there to excel you.
So you don't think ego is a motivator? It doesn't take you to say, I want to go from mediocre. Let's say you're running, just a very simple example. Let's say you run a race every day with your peers, and you always come in third or fourth or fifth, and you say, no, I want to be first. I want to be first. And so because you picture yourself on that, winning that first place trophy, because you picture yourself with everybody looking at you saying, wow, you're the best. I'm going to drive. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to push myself. I'm going to be first. You don't think that's ego that's driving me?
See, ultimately, you have never seen anybody who wants to settle for the second. They always want to be best. Only few exceed from mediocrity into excellence.
Right.
So until they connect a force within them, which allows you to excel beyond your own imagination, you cannot excel. Although it appears to be ego, but ego never really excel you. Ultimately, you have to connect to the inner creativity in you and you become one with it. And then only you excel. And after the fact, you can beat your chest or whatever it is, you can take the claim, or you can shout, I have done it, and you can, on the media, when news media interviews you, I wanted to be the best. So the story you are telling is, your ego is telling the story. You are not even telling the true story.
There's no question that there's ego at the end. And your example of LeBron pumping his chest is something anybody who's ever watched him knows. I mean, the different motions he makes, movements with his arms and everything is, very ego driven at that point. And we're not picking on him. It's evident in a lot of sports and with celebrities. There's no question that ego comes in play afterwards. Totally agree. you've presented an interesting reality for the talk about prior to winning, though, prior to getting that shot in. And I think you agreed with me. There is ego that's involved in trying to be the winner of that race or trying to put that ball into the hoop, but it isn't ego that makes us successful. I think that's what I heard you say.
Yes.
That isn't what actually does make us, give us that success, but it does, maybe inappropriately contribute to that drive. It just doesn't, it isn't enough to put us over the top. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that makes sense now. And I mean, it even more than makes sense. It explains why so many people do have ego and think that that's the proper driver. Because I want to be first. I want to be first. I want to be first. But it doesn't engage their entire body, soul, and spirit to actually accomplish that. It's purely in the brain at that point that I want to be first for all the wrong reasons without engaging the rest of their whole being. I mean, that
Now,
makes sense why there's only one winner in
yeah,
each race, so to speak.
sure. Now, where does the mediocrity comes in? Once you achieved the gold medal, or once you achieved you became the best, and you want to hold on to this, that's where mediocrity comes in. Yeah, mediocrity is driven by fear. It is driven by pragmatism. It is driven by settling for what is in hand. It is driven by you're becoming intimidated and so on. All these, once you have acceptance of your trophy and you want to have the whole world worship you because you won the trophy, rather than going on further to excel on that. See, all our success basically offer us a platform to add higher value. If you stop only at the platform, somebody's going to throw you away because the platform is always rented and they want to give back to the rental place and they want you to get out of that. So you cannot hold on to the platform. Platform is only there to launch another mission to excel on something else. There is another thing. There are a lot of people who have achieved excellence in one field or other, but they remain highly mediocre in every other field. So excellence is really a mindset. Mediocrity is always a mindset driven by fear, by losing, by what if I fail? People are going to laugh at me. So you quit trying. Mediocrity only gets out of you when you become free.
So let's go on that side of it. If we have time in the show, I would love to talk more about people who have attained success and have been on that platform and why they become mediocre after that, or the idea that they've attained the platform there and they're unwilling to go into another area and perform, so that they're only in their niche and their mediocrity still is part of their life because they haven't been able to broaden their horizons and their skills, et cetera. I do want to go there if we can. But there's so many of us, the great majority of the world, that actually has never been on that podium. Okay, we've been in mediocrity or maybe even less, our entire life. And we've never had that moment in the spotlight. We've never ever won that first place trophy in anything meaningful. I mean, we were the people in the classroom that got best smile, okay, or whatever. I mean, a kind of a throwaway kind of a prize that we would get at some point, because we never attained anything meaningful in our life. So that's, I think, the majority of people that we think of when we talk about mediocrity. We really, once somebody has attained one gold medal, it's hard for us to think of them as being mediocre. I mean, maybe your point is valid. Maybe, they hang their hat on that and they never go anything further, which is very sad. But the great majority of us never even win that gold medal once. So let's talk, if we can, about them first, because that's the great majority of people. And I think we have to probably take a quick break so that we don't get started on this, and then we'll come back and delve into it. Why do most of us settle for mediocrity? Is it fear, as you mentioned, fear of failure to expose ourselves to even do more? Is it that we don't realize the benefits of it and we don't think we need to? Is it because we don't think we have it in us to be anything more than mediocre? Those are some of the questions that I have. Why we, and as I said when I started the show, is it okay? Is it okay for us just to say, I'm not going to stress myself out? Life is too short for me to always be disappointed that I don't attain that gold medal. So I'm going to be very happy just to play the game and not have to be the winner. And I'll have that mindset. These are some of the questions in my little brain this morning as we're talking about mediocrity. Ratanjit, I've given you plenty of time here to think about the answers, including our short commercial break. We'll be right back in a moment and talk on stress-free living about why we accept mediocrity. We'll be right back. Boy, kind of went into my rant there. I didn't mean to do that. But giving you time there, Ratanjit, I asked all the questions I'm going to ask when we come back. What other questions should we ask? Open up the microphones to everybody.
Well, this is Doug, and I don't know. You guys are opening up a lot of things in my mind. It seems like that you do excel in some things, but then you're just mediocre in other things. And almost in my mind, it's almost like that's fine, If you really do well in one or two things, and then you're just okay with being mediocre in other things, it seems like that would be a pretty good balance. I don't know, but you guys, you're opening up a lot of thoughts. I'm thinking back at my old high school days when I played baseball, and I was not great at any one thing. I was just an average hitter, average pitcher, average thrower, average runner, but yet I made the team. So who knows?
Right?
I wanted to do better.
That's a good point.
Maybe
If you were left-handed, you probably would make $1 million a year if you were a lefty. Dr. Jagjeet?
Yeah, maybe we don't find a field in which we can excel. We are not able to identify that field because everybody has something in the best, and he might not be able to identify that what is the field in which I can do the best.
Hey, Joe. Joe? We're coming back. We are back on Stress-Free Living. Ratanjit Sandhi, yours truly, Ray Samich, with you. During our breaks, we have great conversations with our guests. They give us all kinds of interesting thoughts and angles for us to think about and explore with all of you. So we appreciate them and appreciate all of you being with us here today. Ratanjit, plenty of time to think about the questions that I asked, and we're going to ask a few other ones that have come through our guest chair, as I just said. But let me ask you, why do you think, if in a nutshell, why do you think that most of us settle for mediocrity our entire life. What do you think is the main reason why we're not even driven to ever achieve that gold medal in any one area? We just are happy to go through life as, let's call it, an average person.
You know, you're always haven't achieved that. Take a small child. A child is very afraid of riding a bicycle. Some are eager to ride a bicycle, but there are others who are so much afraid of falling, and you are holding their hand, you are making them ride a bicycle. So there is you're mentoring somebody to launch on to something which they are not comfortable with. So there are certain people who are comfortable with certain things, certain people who are not comfortable with certain things. So our education system should prepare us to constantly charter territory which is uncharted. So ultimately, we only get one life, and our ultimate pleasures are not tied into material things, which doesn't matter whether we live in $1 million, $10 million home or yacht or something. You eventually going to get bored, because we have seen these billionaires end up committing suicide. So material things is not the end result. Ultimately, it is all self-worth. So what self-worth comes from what you really think of yourself. So if we cultivate this mindset of making anything which we are doing better, so adding the highest value in every thought and action, so suddenly we are parking ourselves into experiencing the joy which comes from doing anything better than what you are destined to do. So it doesn't matter. Ultimately, question is, God, you only have so many skills. You are only good at certain things. You are not good at everything. So once I started my business as a chemist, I knew about the chemicals and all that, but I did not know about marketing. I did not know about management. I did not know about selling. I did not know about manufacturing. So many areas which I have to learn. So certain things come to you easier. There are certain things you have to take more effort to learn. But ultimately, you have to excel in everything. So your failure always is going to happen based on your weakness. Your weakest link is going to end up in failure. Everyone has strong links. Ultimately, we have to continuously make our weakest link as a strongest link. So that only happens when you have mindset of making everything mediocrity into excellence. So all your thought process must always be part in, no matter what you have in hand, making it as a high priority, making it excellent, because only when you bring in your creativity, you challenge your mind, you come into present, and you have the ultimate supreme power which is available to you to make your mediocre into best. Right?
That all makes sense, but as one of our guests pointed out, it's so safe to be in the middle range. if we are an athlete, we find out that we can make our team by being average at 5 different things. You know, and baseball's a great example as he gave it. If I am average or maybe a little above average at hitting, throwing, catching, running, understanding the game, understanding the rules and how to play it, I'm probably going to make the team. Okay. If I'm a C student in school, then I'm probably going to have friends at every level. Okay. The A students they're not going to be intimidated by me. So they're going to like me. The D and F students are going to like me because they're going to say, well, you're not a know-it-all super brain. So I like you. The teachers know that that's the middle range. So they're okay with that. So it's a safe place. Okay. Being mediocre is a very safe place to live my life. You mentioned your business as an entrepreneur. You took a lot of risks as an entrepreneur. You ventured out into the unknown. It's so much easier to be the employee, to be one of your employees in your organization was so much easier. I come in, I get my paycheck every couple of weeks. I do my job. I make sure I do my job so I don't get fired. But as long as I do my job, I collect my pay and I live my life. It seems like mediocrity is so safe and so easy and so secure. And in some ways, it makes more sense to be there, to make the team and not have to worry about the pressure of being the superstar.
See, ultimately, Ray, the world, the whole atmosphere is against us to excel. So when I started, I had my banker advise me not to start my business. My attorney and my accountants advised me not to start a business. And the whole world is against you until you have inner. Ultimately, they all, once you succeed, they give you trophies and medals and write books and interviews and everything. But you are always going to be lonely when you launch something which inspires you, which makes sense to you. And life is all about that. There are two sides of life. If you want everybody to like you, so we are always living in what others are going to say. You know, always, if I do this, what are people going to say? So we are constantly worried about getting everybody's endorsement. And they don't give you endorsement. They criticize you ultimately. Ultimately, people who they write stories, who they interview, are people who have beaten all the odds and went on their own mission to excel. And ultimately, the true happiness, there is an interesting survey, excuse me, that if you see entrepreneurs, true entrepreneurs, who have gone from one to another to always excel, who are starting a new business, they have a better life. Their health is better. They generally live longer than a CEO. A CEO versus an entrepreneur, there is a major difference in how much they live and how much ailment they experience. So your human body operates much better once you are on the path of excellence rather than mediocrity. Right?
I'm getting more and more puzzled as we have this conversation because I'm as we're talking this through, I see the bigger disparity between the people that do stay in mediocrity and the people that want to leave. Yes, you're right. The articles are on people who have overcome mediocrity, especially those that did it at great odds, okay, at great, having to overcome things. In your case, a foreigner in a new land who never had experience owning a business, running a business, who was very much niched in your chemistry laboratory in terms of the mindset, and suddenly now you're going to be in charge of a business and responsible for all of that. That's a great underdog story of somebody, and in your case, you obtained amazing success there and did it in a totally revolutionary way in terms of how you ran your business and the freedoms that you gave to your people and all those kind of things. Those are great stories and they are inspirational, but the great majority of people don't do that. Even with the inspirational interviews and the documentaries, they stay in that level of contentment. It's easy, it's convenient, it's safe, it's secure. Okay. You mentioned the word pragmatic earlier, and I always, in my brain, I try to simplify things. I always think of a synonym whenever I hear a word that isn't usually often. And what I think of when I hear pragmatic is reasonable. Okay. I take a reasonable view on the world if I'm pragmatic. Reasonable means that most of us live in mediocrity. Being reasonable means to me that most of us don't think we can be the best at a race. We don't think we can be the smartest person in the classroom. We don't think we can be an owner of $1 million or $1 billion business. We're reasonable in thinking that I am who I am. I can be a great employee. I can be a member of the team, but not the star of the team. So where does that line cross between me being very content at mediocrity, being very fulfilled with that? I am who I am. I realize my limitations. I don't want the stress. I don't want the fear of having to be more than I'm supposed to be.
See, fulfillment, you use the word for mediocre people, which is totally opposite of that. They will never be fulfilled. They are always parked in scarcity mentality. They are justifying their being in the mediocre range by pragmatism. What would world will say? They are always looking for justification. Now I'm better than this guy. So they're always going to look for people who are less than themselves to satisfy their existence in the area they are. So ultimate fulfillment only available to you once you excel, once you break the mold, once you go into territory which are unknown, once you challenge your creativity, once you inspire yourself and connect to the real power present within you, which is able to do things which are never been done before. So ultimately, whenever the new technology comes, you never thought this could be done. It is impossible. Well, so many people thought, but there was certain number of people who thought this could be done, who explored that, and the satisfaction, fulfillment out of excellence, out of breaking the mold, out of doing something extraordinary is totally different than the satisfaction which you give it to mediocre people. Mediocre people always end up justifying everything. Their whole life is major justification, right?
this is in some ways difficult for you and me to talk about, and I don't want to sound, braggadocious about it, but you and I haven't wanted to live mediocre lives. Okay, we have tried to implement what we're talking about here in terms of trying to excel and be all that we can be within our own areas. So in a way, it's hard for me to relate to this, but I know that there are many people, the majority of people that I have encountered in my life who haven't excelled at the level that maybe they felt they could or should, and they have been happy. Okay, we use the word mediocre in a way that is almost negative. It's almost like, you're only mediocre, as if you aren't anybody. But another word that you could use for mediocre is average. Okay, you're a normal person. You're a normal person. A normal person is an employee, not an employer. There's far more employees in this world than employers. Okay, there's far more average athletes. There's far more average students than there are exceptional athletes and exceptional students. I mean, we see the baseball players and the basketball players and the hockey players on TV, and we know that those are in the top 1% of the top 1% of athletes in the country that are performing on our televisions. And we know that we're not that, and we're normal, and we're okay with that. So, okay, I'm trying to understand, do we even realize that we could be more? Does that bother most people, that we're only average, we're only normal? And do they realize that maybe there is more fulfillment if I'm able to excel?
There are no mediocre people. We only live mediocre life by choice. Everybody has capability to excel and break the mold. And it takes courage, it takes a situation, it takes many times a coach, it takes many times hardship, it takes many catalysts which are there to break the mold from converting a ordinary people into extraordinary person. But until we have that situation, we all are going to opt for mediocrity. Mediocrity is basically a sin, because it is mediocrity. You look at another side of things. If you take iron ore, and you give it to a steel plant, they put it in a furnace and ultimately purify into a pure iron. So pure iron, if it is kept outside the environment, it will become ore again. Follow that? So similarly, until we accelerate, we will become mediocre. Acceleration constantly challenges you, and it is a desire to add highest value. Because when you have addiction of feeling that joy, that fulfillment, which comes from adding the value, you become addicted to it, you will never excel. Because until you have tasted something good, you never go there.
All right. Okay? It's starting to make sense to me. Starting to those puzzlements that I was feeling, I think it's starting to fall in place. Hopefully it is for our audience as well. When we come back from this next short break, we'll kind of put a wrapping on this. how do we take ourselves out of that mediocrity? And even back to your earlier point, if we've fallen back into that, if we become or again, even though we had that moment of being on the podium, how do we inspire ourselves to come back and achieve and excel more? We'll come back on Stress-Free Living and wrap this up. Please stay with us.
We have Kim and Sana join us.
Yes. Ladies or gentlemen,
Good
any
morning.
thoughts?
I'm ready to take a flight, but I'm glad to jump in. I apologize for being late. I think what bothers me about breaking the mode or having a desire is the lack of enrollment of people around me when I see so much potential in them, but maybe they are not on board with it. Like family, friends, and I'm saying together we can do so much, and they're like, yeah, we're fine.
Yes, yes.
So I'm torn between the drive that I have to make a difference within the family and the community and the complacency sometimes or the resignation of those around me.
Yes.
Very good. Good thoughts. Safe travels. Anybody else real quickly?
Well,
What's
I
that?
don't know. I
No,
don't know.
Sana,
if-
you
you're
have
good.
a
Thank you, Kim.
comment?
Thank you.
So I'm getting more confused as I listen, because I think you excel in one or two things, but you can't excel in everything. So you're going to be mediocre in a lot of things, even though you excel. That's back to LeBron James, great basketball player, but there's a lot of other things that he is pretty mediocre, I would. So you're going to get to excel in us, in my mind, and I'm here to.
We are back on Stress-Free Living. Thank you so much for being with us here today. Great interaction with our guests. We have to cut them off sometimes because we want to come back to our main audience here with all of you listening. Ratanjit, I'm going to pick up on one of the thoughts that we just heard from one of our guests. And that is that even if we are motivated, even if we ourselves say, okay, yes, I can do more, I can be more, doesn't it take a village to use that expression? How do we continue if we're surrounded by others who accept mediocrity, who are not only not supporting us, but they're not seeing that together as a group, as a team, we can really achieve great things, and they're very happy with complacency. That's almost demotivating to us. How do we survive in that, even if we're able to overcome our own lack of inspiration?
It's a very good question. The society as a whole has to first understand the mediocrity is a sin. And to fulfill everyone into having achieved the total satisfaction, to have a life which is meaningful, you have to excel. So suddenly the society started the paradigm of excellence. So it starts with schools, it starts with colleges, education, it starts with families. So suddenly the acceleration of excellence is taking place. So suddenly you are going to have more of excellent people than less of excellent people. You are constantly challenging them to achieve better, or society will be a much better place for us to live in absence of mediocrity. Because ultimately, mediocrity, we pay very high price for that, very high price for that. Because ultimately, when it's very obvious when you have a mediocre doctor, so your life automatically suffers because somebody, when you have a mediocre leader, when you have a mediocre decision maker, so we end up paying a very high price for that. The whole society does. So ultimately, mediocrity comes from closed-mindedness, not to listening to new ideas, not to thinking there is a better way always to do anything, to constantly exploring new horizons. And one of our guests said that how can you be excellent in everything? You have to be mediocre at so many things. Even the best player is mediocre at so many things. Yes, this is the key. So we have so many areas we can excel into. So life is constant challenge of excelling into new era. There is this guy who has entrepreneur. This guy is has started many new businesses, and I don't want to name him, but this guy has a tendency that every day he has made himself a promise to learn something new. As he reads so much, he automatically diverts himself into totally unknown. And as a consequence, he gets new ideas. He starts a business. And this man has succeeded in so many of businesses. And automatically, this proves the point that we are always, life is constant challenge of converting mediocrity into excellence. That doesn't mean that you are going to be excellent at everything. That only means there are so many ways we can excel, and we should take that opportunity to constantly excel into so many areas, because that will fulfill your life. You will begin to enjoy every moment of life. You will never become old. You will never become obsolete. You will never be unhappy. What we call happiness is a facade. And when you ask somebody, are you happy? Yeah, I'm very happy. Give 10,000 reasons. But ultimately, this is a facade. Your true happiness only comes from internal fulfillment of your quest to learn more, quest to add the highest value, quest to have higher recognition of self-worth, right?
I think that you just said, again, marvelous things, but I think the very last 5 words you said maybe sum this topic up better than anything else, is that if we think that we are doing these things for others and for ego and everything else, then the inspiration that we get from that, I think, is short-lived, and it explains why we don't want to excel. But if it is self-worth, okay, the very last thing you said, if it is saying, when I'm laying on my deathbed and I reflect on my life, whether it was 20 years or 120 years, what can I say that I have accomplished in my life? What has been my self-worth to the world? And I think if that thought is in our brain, then we won't settle for mediocrity, because we know that there's something in us that should be giving the world more, that I can know that while I was here in this human uniform for this period of time, I accomplished something meaningful. We talked about the interviews and stuff, the success stories of people who defied the odds, but the real inspirational stories are the people that kept trying even when they had failures. And you see that these people went above and beyond over and over again for their dream, for what they believed was inside of them. And then you can see the incredible joy and fulfillment when they finally attained what they were going after. And those, to me, are the most inspirational stories. Not necessarily doing something good the first time, doing something amazing the first time is good, but doing something amazing when you've overcome great hurdles, to me, is the ultimate success story. That's the ultimate level of success and doing things. I mean, your own story, Ratanjit, is amazing in terms of, you attained a lot, and then you lost a lot, and then you attained something much higher the second time through. Your resilience, your fortitude to move forward, those are the great stories. I think the greatest stories that inspire us. Once you've had that failure and you've experienced that pain and you've taken a risk and lost, I think most people settle for mediocrity at that point. What drove you in your example of what you overcame? What caused you to say, I'm not going to settle now, even though that's the safe route? I'm going to excel further and try it again. What was your motivator adding value?
Well, ultimately, when a failure happens, my mother used to say, failure is a ultimate success, and success is a ultimate failure. Because when you succeeded in spite of your weaknesses. And you camouflage your weaknesses. You never know your weaknesses. When you failed, when you get the ego aside and you analyze, you understand your weaknesses. You excel into those weaknesses. You basically make room to make your weaknesses as your strength. And ultimately, the failure is what you utilize to make you more successful. So ultimately, it is very essential that in life we fail, because failure is the greatest teacher we can have. Everyone has downfall and then go up, and downfall and then go up. Whenever you are charting an uncharted territory, you are bound to have drawbacks. So these failures are not failures. They are basically hiccups. They are basically time to learn. They are basically to regroup yourself. So ultimately, your success is your ego, fulfills your ego. Your failures challenge you to learn more.
We always talk about gratefulness. It sounds like we should be grateful for our successes, but in some ways, even more grateful for our failures.
Yes.
Okay.
We should be grateful for our failures. Success will come. Success is only ego-driven. Ultimately, success, your ego goes out and accepts the trophy. Ultimately, it is all ego-driven. Success, if you have not learned from success and failure, you have not learned. They are only teaching you new ways to excel, new ways to add the highest value. Focus on adding the highest value, you will be all excelling.
And as we said earlier, though, the ego that drives us to success isn't necessarily what gives us that success. It still takes those right set of circumstances and how we perform and how we behave. So it's the combination. The ego may be the driver, but it's the actual ultimate motivator that gives us that success. I think, as one of our guests here said, in some ways we've answered some questions. In some ways we've even made this a little bit more confusing. I think we need to continue on this topic next week and explain further. Are we settling for mediocrity, or is it a vital part of our life to overcome mediocrity? How do we really be grateful for our mistakes? Because that's a whole new concept. being grateful for our failures is something that I don't think have explored before. In that way, I should be very grateful because I've had so many of those. So let's just continue this topic, but be very grateful for what we've done so far and where you've taken us. Ratanjit, thank you for sharing your thoughts and your love and your kindness with us here today, and to all of our guests and our audience. We appreciate you being with us. Please, we will continue this topic next week. Hope that you can join us again. Remember, we're all playing the same game. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.